The business community lauding Dr Sam Motsuenyane as a black business pioneer, visionary, a farmer and a philanthropist. The 97-year-old, one of the co-founders of the National African Federated Chamber of Commerce, also known as NAFCOC, also being remembered for his role in the establishment of African Bank. Tumasang and Lovo joins me now on this. Tumasang, good afternoon to you. When we think of Dr Sam Motsuenyane, you're thinking of a tradition of black business that goes back, almost to the 1850s or so, almost completely destroyed by apartheid. It was people like him who were able to keep it alive against absolutely everything.
You are quite correct, Stephen, and that's what the presidency focused on in celebrating the life of Motsuenyane at the age of 97. Those are good innings, and the resilience that it speaks to. Not only was he making a buck for himself, but most of the organizations that he's tied to, the likes of NAFCOC, are meant to be building black business in this country. The farming side of things, it must have been more leisure for him, really, as much as you make revenue there. But black business individuals coming out today just celebrating the life of a man that is a pioneer of that resilience that we speak to. Over and above that, I mean, you look at African Bank today, it's evident enough that the proof really is in the eating of that particular pudding. But more on that, we are joined by our business reporter, Ntokozo Khumalo, who actually had a pleasure of meeting Dr. Motsuenyane just last year. She is at the Black Business Council Summit and joins us now. Ntokozo, what has been said so far about this amazing man?
Afternoon, Dumisang. That resilience you speak about has certainly been a word that I've been hearing throughout the day. And of course, he's considered as the founding father or one of the founding fathers of black business, really managing to get African Bank off the ground despite the several challenges that being a black businessman faced in during apartheid era. And I am now with BBC president, and that is Elias Monache. We are reflecting on the great life of the founder of African Bank, which is truly a black bank. As BBC, how do you reflect on his legacy for black business specifically?
Afternoon to you and the viewers at various places this afternoon. I think indeed it's a loss to the country, to the continent, to have a visionary of that magnitude as Dr. Sam Motsuenyane. I mean, if you then follow through the things that you have done over the years, for them to envision a black bank that carries even African Bank, it was not an easy task, to the extent that they took 10 years to raise 1 million rand. It then tells a story on its own. The difficulties for them then to do that, for them to have a vision, to have a platform to transact, because trade, it requires a banking platform. And I'm saying that is a visionary of note, and I think as a continent, we need them to embrace black entrepreneurs of his stature, together with others that they are no more, like Abundate Maponya and the rest of them, because that crop of leadership in the black business that we had, we're still thinking whether will this country ever produce the same caliber of leadership that people have, a thorough visionary, people that they are dedicated to the lives of improving the black people, a visionary people that they see a transformatory agenda at the years of apartheid, where this country was not even democratic, to basically then thrive despite all the limitations and the challenges, to basically register a bank, an African bank, and under his stewardship, that bank have done amazing things in the country. And I think even now it remains the only black bank in the country. And I think as a black organization, we want them to cherish and adore. Not only then do that, but then to move beyond as part of the reflection to say we need them to retain the ownership of that bank in the black hands, in the country, so that we need them to use it as a bank that everybody in the country can then use it, both in the business side and even the workers to basically then use that as a bank of choice. And we will urge government also then to use that in terms of paying the grants and other related issues so that they support that black bank. And the last thing that we want them to do with that bank is basically then to have an engagement with Treasury and the Minister of Finance to look at a better way of the black consortia getting the equity of that bank so that it then remains in the black hands, because currently there are 4 major banks that they have 25% of the bank. So it will then be much better and ideal to preserve the ideal and the ideas of the gallant fallen son of the soil, Dr Sam Motsuenyane, so that this dream cannot just vanish. And hence it's important for us then to do that as part of the reflection.
Absolutely. And I suppose at his last lecture that we did get to speak to him at, he really highlighted the importance of skills. And exactly as you're saying, to ensure that black businesses continue to really cement themselves in the mainstream economy. One of the sectors of the economy that he highlighted for opportunities for black business, particularly being agriculture, but also highlighting the skills gap that we still need to fill, especially as we look into the future. Talk us through some of the discussions that we were having at the Black Business Council Summit around some of those issues.
I think this summit took place at a time when the country was celebrating the 30 years of democratic dispensation from 1994 to 2024. As a business organization, part of the reflection for us then is then to deep dive and zoom into the current economic discourse of the country, of the continent, globally, to say, where do we play as part of the reflection? Because when we then reflect, we then look at the gains as black people that we have attained post-1994 during this period of 30 years. And this conference have identified a number of gains that we have attained and achieved. And equally so, this summit identified the challenges that they continue then to prohibit and limit black businesses to flourish and move to a different level. The third component, I think, for us, over and above looking at the challenges, is then the road ahead. Now, some of the issues that we have then looked at, we have zoomed into various sectors. Agriculture is one of the areas to say we cannot then talk about agriculture, food security, and we want then to limit and contain black farmers to remain as subsistence farmers. We need then to elevate them to become commercial farmers. This is one of the things that we want then to look at, and this summit address some of the constraints in the farming sector to say what are the mechanisms, what are the instruments that we require to move that sector to a level that is acceptable. That's the one thing. The second thing, we've also then identified a number of other sectors that our people need then to play and do a meaningful role as part of the inclusive economy. For example, the health sector is one of the critical sectors that historically and even to date, most of our black professionals and business people in that sector, they're not playing any meaningful role. They're not included in that sector for a number of reasons. Whether you then look at pharmaceutical, you look at hospitality or hospital sector. The ownership of the hospitals is privately owned by white, well established. And now these are some of the things that we need then to look at in terms of that inclusive economy, to say how then do we then bring the marginalized into that sector. The third component for us is the financial services, because financial services is one of the critical sectors that continue with the current trajectory where majority of the black people or business people and professionals, they're not playing any meaningful role in that sector for a number of reasons. And these are some of the things that we've identified mechanisms, how best can we then bring black individuals and business people then to play that. one of the critical areas is how then do we look at the pension funds, for example, because pension funds, they are then invested in various places by asset managers. Now, part of the things that we're then saying, black asset managers, they should not operate in silos, in a fragmented way. They need them to collaborate and then look at complementarity and alignment so that we then establish a bigger asset black managers that manages the funds of the majority of the people in this country so that we can then use that to change the patterns of ownership and the patterns of investments in various sectors of the economy. The other component that we're looking at, again, is the question of banking. The banking, we're then saying African bank is the ideal time now for government to relook at bringing a black consortium to consolidate that bank and then look at the ownership and the equity into that bank so that it then remains truly in the hands of the black people in the country. Over and above that, for us, part of the reflection also was to look at the judicial system in the country to say, in terms of the legislation, in terms of the policies, in terms of the regulatory environment, what are the things that we've achieved from the broad-based black economic empowerment to employment equity to the Black Industrialist Program to say we need then to look at some of the things to be reviewed so that we can then forge ahead in the next coming period. To the extent that the public procurement bill that is before Parliament, it needs then to be signed into law because it then also then give a trigger in terms of changing the patterns of ownership in the country where government will then procure to specific entities that are black-owned, women-owned, and will then have a set aside for black youth. And these are some of the issues that we're then looking at in terms of this thing. And I think it is within that context that at this summit for us, it was a success, not only in terms of attendance, because we are oversubscribed, but in terms of the quality of the debates around the economic issue to say what type of economy and policies that we require. And surely post this summit, we're then looking at an engagement with government entities across different levels so that we then take forward the discussions on the economic issues and the regulatory environment.
Elias Monaga, thank you so much for those insights. And we've run out of time to really unpack some of the discussions that took place here today. But of course, business owners here, black business owners, Dumisang, really reflecting on Dr. Sam Motsuenyane's life and legacy as the founding father of black business. And I do understand, Dumisang, that you have the chairman of African Bank with you there. So I'll throw back to you for that conversation.